Yep, all good. All right, colleagues and members of the gallery, people watching online, I will open the meeting formally as the chair at 4:01. Just noting apologies and leave of absence. I believe Alderman Zuko is on a leave of absence. Other apologies, Councillor Dutta, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor herself. Moving on to acknowledgement of country, item number 1. It is important, I think, in planning in particular, to acknowledge that we are approving and considering development applications on Palawa land, on land that was never ceded by the Aboriginal people of Tasmania. And I think we should always keep that in the back of our heads when we're considering these applications. Moving on to item 2, confirmation of minutes. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Lohberger. All those in favour? Yes. Carried unanimously. Consideration of supplementary items. Are there any supplementaries this evening? There are not. Being none, we'll move on to item 4, indications of conflicts of interest. Do any elected members have any indications of a conflict they'd like to declare? There being none, we'll move on to transfer of agenda items. Item 5. Does anyone wish to transfer an agenda item? No. Moving through to items number 6, planning authority items, considerations of items with deputations.
We do have deputations. I'll move we hear the deputations.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. And with that, I will open us as acting under the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme of 2015 and invite deputations for item 7 at 1.2, 41 Salamanca Place, to come up to the table. Where's Elizabeth? I don't think Lorraine is in the room. No. Yeah, normally, but she's not here. Mr. Reid, before you commence, we do have a representative who's listed this evening, who's not present. We're just quickly checking that she's not lost in the building somewhere before we, as normal, we'll commence to your representation.
Yep. Thank you very much.
So just give us a minute. No, if everyone's amenable, then we shall just move through to the deputation from the applicant, Mr. Fraser Reid, the principal, as well as Andrew O'Connell, the project architect from All Urban Planning. You know the rules, Mr. Reid, so go for it.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. We do have a presentation that we just wanted to go through, and I'll leave that to Andrew. But before I pass to Andrew, I just wanted to confirm that we're happy with the recommendation. You would have read the report. You might have seen my emails just responding to a matter about the potential for reuse of number 8 Montpellier. I know that has come up. I've provided some further info about that. Andrew's going to touch on it, but we'd also be happy to sort of answer any questions you have around that. This, of course, is an accommodation use that complements an existing accommodation use, a highly successful one, but there's a need for some more rooms, and we can talk to that. But additional accommodation, this is the right area for it. That's definitely going to help accommodation supply in the Hobart area and take some pressure off other residential uses, perhaps. So I'll pass to Andrew. We can go through the proposal and then obviously talk about anything of interest to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Fraser. Thank you for allowing us to speak. I've got about 15 slides that kind of catch the salient points of the scheme, trying to demonstrate the thinking behind it, and then eventually we'll come to number 8 and just talk about why we ultimately thought that the adaptive reuse of that building was too difficult for this particular scheme. So we'll talk to that directly. So first slide here, I'll just talk about the height and form of the building. So there's been a couple of things from an urban design. We've been to two UDAP processes, and went very well, and we got some really good positive feedback from UDAP, which we took on board. But ultimately, the scheme is a zero boundary allocation, so it actually carries the street line the whole up Montpellier Retreat, and it focuses on essentially the rhythm of that street, starting on Salamanca as it turns up Montpellier. You can see from this slide. Then when there's two buildings which are actually quite low, they're in the order of only 6 meters tall, and the base height control is at 12 meters. So we have taken on the height control of 12 meters for the two components you see, the glazed components with the entry to the left of those glazed components. That's the two darker spaces. They're actually the rooms as they move up through the street. And then there's a floor that sets back from the 12-meter height limit, and it stays generally within the 15-meter height limit as a setback floor to give us the yield that we require for the hotel. So this is just a quick analysis of the stepping of the contour. So originally, before the quarry was excavated, there was actually a series of contours that marched up the site. So this development respects that stepping of the site and the stepping of the buildings up along Montpellier Retreat. And that demonstrates, and also it's a series of buildings that are essentially connected, of the same character, zero lot setbacks. So we've actually carried that rhythm up the street, up along Montpellier Retreat, up as far as the Quarry Apartments. Actually, in front of the Quarry Apartments, there's actually an existing building, which is essentially Chemist Warehouse style building, which eventually probably will get developed at some point. It's actually quite reasonably low. This slide, the bottom slides show essentially everything within the 12-meter height limit. The next slide shows the elements that pierce above the 15-meter height limit. So that's essentially the two red dots of the plant room and the leading edge of one of the edges of the building. And then the top is the 12-meter height limit that goes through to within the 15. Then the bottom slide is actually everything below the 18-meter height limit. So, and that's actually, that height plane is actually below the Quarry Apartment, so that makes sense. So 12, 15, 18 in that sequence.
30 seconds left in your deputation.
Okay. Some cross sections which demonstrate the setback of the upper levels. This slide here just shows the proximity of the apartments to the development, and we're actually looking at screening that southeast corner. And this is a view up Montpellier Retreat, showing the buildings as they continue up Montpellier and start to step up and set back. And this is from Salamanca Square. So they actually blend and sit behind most of the building forms in Salamanca Square. A view down to Montpellier Retreat, just showing the scale continuing down through the street. Shadow diagrams just demonstrates that the lower level, midwinter, there's only 1 hour of sunlight, so 1 hour shadowing onto the existing lowest level apartment. So other than that, the shadowing is actually pretty good, given the orientation of the development. So it doesn't have any great negative effect on either the apartments nor the square. Privacy, we're going to increase the privacy on the southeast corner to the apartments, and that's a two-way street, so we want to increase privacy to the hotel rooms from the apartments and vice versa. And then heritage, we've been asked to keep a heritage wall. We've re-engineered a fire escape so it doesn't go through that wall, and that's retained. That was a request. And then lastly, this is the question about adaptive reuse of number 8. We actually did look into this very carefully at the time. The levels of this particular building are actually very difficult. to even blend with the future development. It also has been vacant for 5 years, and it's been very hard to lease out. So it's actually, and it's past its use by date. In actual fact, in terms of services and structure, it's got adaptive reuse is actually very difficult. Excavating under to get the hotel to work was really difficult. Putting a building on top of it was actually also structurally quite difficult. So, but the big thing was the zero setback alignment. It actually sets back from the street, and when you're looking at these early urban design responses where all the buildings are really beautifully held to the street line, this is the one building that doesn't do that. It actually sets back, and it's kind of erodes the urban fabric in some ways.
Mr. O'Connell, I'll stop you there. I've let you go a little bit longer on indulgence.
Yeah.
But if elected members have some questions for our deputies to that, I'll open up to you. Councillor Harvey.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, could you tell me a bit more about that building, please?
Yes. So, 1969 building. Fraser might be able to pitch in a little bit on this one.
Yes, it won a triennial award from the Institute of Architects. So this was back in 1969. I think it won those awards. It obviously does have some attributes of that era of building, and if we could have reused it, we would have, and I think that's probably the key thing. Andrew can probably just explain the balance of what he was talking about in terms of the complexity around that.
So the adaptive reuse of this building, given that the brief needed that site, and yield was, from a commercial point of view, the hotel currently that sits there has 20 rooms, and our client in reality needed in the order of another 70 rooms to get the hotel in that component to be viable. And in trying to adaptively reuse this building, we couldn't actually achieve that yield. It was considerably less. So that's one issue. The other issue was the floor levels of this building were very difficult to connect with the with the proposal as well, given the fact that the floor level is already established within the front buildings onto Salamanca. So that was another issue. And then lastly, we really didn't have any substructural space, both for car parking and in particular back of house servicing for a hotel. So it would have meant that we would have had to try and excavate underneath this existing building, and quite frankly that was almost cost prohibitive. And in order to achieve the yield, we also would have had to put a building or an extra floor on top of this particular building. And lastly, it steps up from the street, so disabled access was actually, if you were to use this as a foyer or an entry point and an egress point, that was also a difficult factor here. And also we had the setback, which really was contrary to, I suppose, the urban fabric of completion of that as a block of, as a building block, essentially.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Further questions? Councillor Elliott.
Is there, through you, Chair, is there anything else we need to know about this application? Thank you.
Look, I think you've got extensive sort of supporting reports, and you've got the officer reports. You've got a very detailed heritage report from your officers, and it has been to UDAP 3 times now, and they're very supportive. So
thank you.
I don't think there's any issues here.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Are there any historical walls or remains of other buildings on the inside of the Hollyman House, at the back of it or below or anything like that?
There are, and UDAP's comments talk about it, and the heritage officers do as well. And so if you, on the Salamanca Square side, above the council's toilets, at the end of that there's this beautiful old sandstone wall, like very heavy sandstone wall, and Andrew just touched on it briefly in the description, but we did have a fire door coming out through that, which we thought was a mandatory requirement in terms of proximity and travel distances and things. We worked out that we can avoid that with a fire engineered solution, so that's retained without disturbance, basically. Yeah.
Thanks for that response. I had another question in relation to what's being sent, and I'd like to direct it to the relevant council officer.
Councillor Kelly, we'll just keep the order. I'll come to you first for director questions. Do we have any questions further for our deputies tonight, elected members? Councillor Harvey.
Just with regard to the parking, so the crossover there is off Montpellier, and will cars be able to pass each other? I couldn't quite pick it in the designs.
So it's a single access.
Is there a traffic light at the
Yes,
end?
there will be a
Okay,
traffic light,
I didn't
and
see
it was about actually retaining the solidity of the facade. So we've minimised services and minimised penetration through the base of the building for that reason. So the main penetration through the base of the building is actually entry, which has been celebrated between the heritage items and the new development.
Okay. And one more. And is there an option to park bikes in the basement as well, or in the car parking area, if people want to do cycling touring and stay at the hotel?
Yes, there would be.
They'll be able to safely park their bikes
Yeah, we could allocate some space to bicycle parking. There is
with a
space.
secure cage for. Yeah. Yep. All right. Thank you.
If there's nothing further from elected members, thank you very much for your deputation, Mr. Reid and Mr. O'Connell. If you guys can take a seat, I believe Miss Anderson has just arrived, and at my discretion, we're a little bit out of order, but I will invite her to give her deputation now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Welcome, Miss Anderson. If you... Yeah. Miss Anderson, if you just take a seat at the table. Take a seat at the table, Miss Anderson. If you can speak into the microphone so we can hear you well enough. You have 5 minutes. You'll be given a 4-minute 30 notification that you have 30 seconds to go. Please make your deputation now.
Good afternoon. My name is Lorraine Anderson and I live at 39 Salamanca Square in Battery Point. I was in receipt of emails and flyers telling me of a proposed development application that had come before the council. I purchased our apartment in January 25 and it presented itself as a completed development site. The DA threatens all that I purchased at considerable cost. Investment. I object to many things this DA proposes, and you're probably well aware of what I'm going to say. The proposed hotel site sits in front of our apartment. It will block sunlight, cast shadows where none are now. It will appear to be an overdeveloped site. The vista we enjoy is that of gabled rooftops, tree tops and clear skies above. We will lose all of this. Windows from the hotel will impede on our privacy. We enjoy eating out on our small terrace and we will now be on display. The proposed construction will take a long time to complete. This will take from us our peaceful and precious time left to us. Had the development application been lodged at the time of our purchase, we would not have invested in this apartment. This DA, if approved, will seriously impact the value of our apartment. There is bulk and height exceeding its surroundings. I request that site poles be erected to show the actual height and bulk of this proposed building. Salamanca Square Place, as you know, holds considerable attraction to visitors and locals alike. To impede on such a large development threatens the unique charm of this area. I thank you for your time. I have just one word to add, and that is from philosophy. That word is why.
Thank you for your deputation, Ms Anderson. We may have some questions, so I'll just ask you to stay seated until we clear that. Elected members, do you have any questions for Ms Anderson? No questions, Ms Anderson. Please take a seat back in the gallery. Thank you. Alderman Bloomfield.
Just wanted to make a point. By reversing the order, we've actually challenged natural justice. So I'm not sure how you'd like to handle that, but I do think that we've just possibly failed our process.
I'm not convinced of natural justice argument, but I will just seek some advice from staff. What I'll do, just because it is a little unconventional as we are trying to manage a number of issues here with a deputation arriving a little late, I'll just look to Mr Reid and Mr O'Connell and ask, is there anything that you specifically want to respond to from the deputation just made, or are you happy with us continuing on with our debate? Councillor Harvey.
Do you think the privacy of the representative will be compromised?
Councillor Harvey, I'll just stop you for a sec. I'll just ask Mr Reid to come up to the table just to respond to any further questions that this has prompted.
If we're being challenged on this, then we probably need to repeat the questions. Or
Yep, that's fine. Okay, Councillor Harvey, ask your
Mr.
question
Reid,
again.
there was a suggestion that the privacy of the respondent would be compromised from the hotel, looking into their balcony where they have their, social occasions and dinner and food, whatever.
Look, I don't know the full detail of where their apartment is. I was just trying to look at it online, but there will be some change to their outlook. The lower level of the lower two levels, I think it's levels 2 and 3, have screening on them that would prevent views back towards the apartment, which is number 39. And then the top level, and that's what Andrew just spoke to before, that we think would be of benefit for both the Aquaria Apartments and the hotel occupants to have some additional screening at that 4th level. So subject to that additional screening at the 4th level, I don't think there's a privacy issue. I do think it would change their outlook, but I don't think that's something that the planning scheme relies on. And the other thing is the shadow diagrams demonstrate that in the middle of winter, there'd be full sun until about 2 o'clock. So, very good sunlight by any standard. You'd be aware of the sort of rule of thumb, 3 hours between 9 and 3 in the middle of winter. That's not something that even this scheme sort of protects, but obviously it's good for us to realise that that's a minimum standard of reasonable overshadowing, reasonable sunlight. So I think you could be comfortable that all those things are reasonably addressed, but I do think some additional screening at that upper level would be appropriate.
Thank you, Mr Reid.
And one more.
Councillor Harvey.
It was also suggested that the view across the rooftops would be altered. You wouldn't be able to see the hip roofs once they've been demolished and the new developments occurred. What's your response to the right to have a view? or to change the view?
Look, there's not a response. There's not a right to have a view, but I think the whole setting, is important. But I wouldn't place great significance on, like, a small number of residents, that view, as opposed to the balance of their view back out, towards the northeast and east across the Salamanca, apartments, and not the apartments, the warehouses, the back of the warehouses. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything in the scheme that protects the views like that, no.
No. So there's no protection of views.
That's right. Any further questions for Ms Reid in light of the deputation? No, thank you again for coming up a second time. We appreciate that.
Thank
I
you.
will open elected members' questions to our staff and director. Councillor Kelly, I believe you had one.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, whilst we're on that matter of what's happened with this agenda item being brought forward, we're not leaving ourselves open for any legal challenges from the applicant nor the appellant here as to not all information being heard or whatever. I just want to make sure we're 100% right, so I don't want to be party to this decision if we're going to cop it, stick over it.
I think now that there's been opportunity to respond to that that representation's concerns, I think that's that issue's kind of been addressed with that additional response time.
Oh, that's good. Also, too, I just want to make sure from representors' viewpoint that they'd heard all the information that, or they're aware of that was just talked about prior to them coming as well. I just wanted to, it's a double-sided thing here. So,
Councillor Kelly, I think the director's made their response. Do you have a further question on?
Excuse me, for you, Chair, I don't think he has. Not the second part of that question I just said. Councillor Harvey has something.
I was just going to clarify. The meeting started on time, and we went through the agenda items. We didn't switch any items around. We came to item 7.1.1. Sorry, 7.1.2, and we commenced that item. And the representative hadn't arrived, and we did delay by a minute or so, I think. And then we went into the deputations. We weren't sure how long it would take for the representative to get here. I think Miss Aby did look around the building to see if there was anyone, if she could find the representative. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, Ms Russ did check to see whether the earlier deputation was already here, yes.
Yep, and we couldn't find them.
Through you, Chair, yes, that's correct.
So we did go through the
Great,
proper
just
process.
as long as we're covered, fantastic, no problem. Through you, Chair, to the relevant planning officer, the Sullivan's Cove planning scheme, which this falls under this application, I'm correct in saying that. Yeah. Regarding financial viabilities of projects, is that a consideration for a planning authority to consider whether the floor plan stacks up to be profitable or not? Is that something we should be taking into account with the assessment of this application?
Through you, Chair. No, look, it's not something that's specifically called up in this part of the planning scheme. It's really, I suppose, the advice that's been provided by the applicant is really to respond to the representations that are raised. I suppose that the officers obviously have made their own assessment of the proposal against the relevant provisions of the scheme. The additional response about viability was really to respond to the representations to provide some kind of certainty to the elected members that the viability of keeping that building had been fully explored. So,
through you, Chair, so we don't take into account any consideration whether there's 10 apartments are needed and only 5 can fit, or that's nothing for us to consider?
yeah, through you, Chair, no.
Fine, okay, thank you.
Further questions for staff, elected members? Councillor Lohberger.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to get some clarity on height here. I'm aware that the building height is 17 metres. I'm just wondering what the height of the Salamanca Square apartments are at their highest point behind this building as you look at it from Montpelier. Do we have that? Mr Reid might know, in fact.
The architect might have some more kind of accurate details on that. I think it's having a look at those kind of diagrams where it's showing the stepping up of the buildings and their height is probably the best visual indication of it, unless the architect of the site's got some more detail on that height from being there through the concept design stage.
Please.
So the ridge height of the quarry apartments is RL 26.1, and the top of the plant room is 3.2 metres below that. So basically below RL 23. So that's the highest point of this building, is at least 3.2 metres below the height of the apartments, quarry apartments.
Thank you again, Mr. Reid.
Thank you, Chair.
Further questions, elected members? There being no further questions, I'll open the item up for debate and a mover, one way or the other. Councillor Harvey.
Look, Chair, I'm comfortable moving this item for approval as per the officer's recommendation. It's had support from UDAP. There's been a number of meetings with UDAP, as I understand, and those meetings have been productive and led to some better outcomes with regard to the details of this proposal. The heritage wall, which was noted that might have been compromised by a doorway, has been satisfactorily addressed, I understand. I think the finish of the building on Montpellier Retreat is quite elegant. I think it's a much better treatment, a much superior treatment than what's there now, which I think is a bit of an eyesore. I know we have one building which is potentially a significant 1960s structure, but that doesn't allow for this development to occur if it was retained, as I've heard from the proponents, and I support the removal of that building to facilitate this development. So, as I said at the start, I'm comfortable with approving or supporting this development tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Kitsos.
Chair, look, I completely agree with Councillor Harvey's comments. I think this is a great development that is very well thought out, and I'm delighted to hear that the proponent has worked with officers over a number of months, and indeed perhaps longer, to finalise this design in a way that is very complementary to the area. I think the planning scheme in this area is difficult from a heritage perspective, as it well should be, and that this building has factored in all of the design elements which will make it sit nicely within Salamanca Square. I also acknowledge the use of the building. I think it's really important that we continue to develop our hotel industry, and adding additional bed availability to the city is one of the ways that we can combat short stay accommodation. So I am very pleased to see the upgrade of our hotel accommodation in this area. I think it's a really appropriate use for the building, and I think that the heritage report really speaks for itself in terms of the effort that the proponent's gone to make sure that it does actually comply and is complementary to the area.
Thanks for your contribution, Councillor Kitsos. Councillor Lohberger.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just through you, are we able to potentially add a condition regarding screening on the 4th level, just as was referred to by Mr. Reid in response to the applicant, Ms. Anderson?
Director, a condition or advice clause?
Through you, Chair. Look, there's no requirement in the scheme. Look, we could add that as an advice clause for consideration for the applicant. But yeah, look, we would be leaving ourselves slightly exposed if we were to apply that without a head of power under the planning scheme.
Thank you,
I'm quite satisfied with that as an advice, given that Mr. Reid himself brought it up and said they're quite happy.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lohberger. I was going to say that the proponent wants to do it for their own reasons as well as the neighbours. So if there's no objections to having that as an advice-only clause, we'll make sure that's in the recommendation.
Happy to include that.
Councillor Lohberger, do you have anything further?
Yes, I did want to make my contribution now. It seems to me that the big issue with this building for the respondents and those who have submitted is around the height. I'm not a particular fan of large buildings in heritage areas, particularly in areas where there are much lower neighbours, because height is all about context, I believe. In this particular case, I believe the context is that there are significant other high buildings around this building, and that it is stepping up the hill as was described by the architects. The height does step up nicely as Montpelier Retreat rises, and is then crowned essentially by the top of the Salamanca Square apartments. I'm actually really pleased to see this come before us. Really, I understand quite a few of the submitters were submitting on the basis of their fondness for the 1969 brutalist building, but I personally find it quite ugly, and I think the Chemist Warehouse building next to it, or the former Chemist building next to it, is also extremely ugly. It is simply a big brick pillbox that's been rendered. And so I'm really happy to see those buildings go, to be honest. I would apologise to those people who have some attachment to the Hollymans building, but I'm not one of them. And I guess the point being that I'm making here is I think this development is quite complementary on the streetscape. It fits into the site nicely. I see no real problem with it. I'm happy that the applicant is quite happy to work with neighbours about things like screening. I'm quite supportive of this building. I'll be voting for it, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks for your contribution, Councillor Lohberger. Any other elected members wish to make a contribution? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Look, this is one of these real tough ones for us being in this capital city. It's heritage. This is a heritage area. It falls under the Sullivan's Cove planning scheme. And it's just one of those gnarly ones that will challenge us. And with these, I really try and dig deep into making a good decision. I'll just go through a few of those minor points. The height, well, it's not a minor point. Look, whilst you look down, those slides are interesting. You look down the road Montpelier there. It doesn't look too bad actually. Go down the bottom of Montpelier, you look up on the other side of Salamanca, and I go, don't know about that. You come up the middle and you look across, sort of in between. So, once again, a bit objective as to how you look at that. I still believe that it really does push that envelope. The overshadowing, if you believe the shade diagrams, which are right, of course, it should be negligible. Parking, interesting to see how we're transforming our whole attitude on parking for this council. Up in North Hobart, only about 15 years ago, if you couldn't provide a park for every 5 seats for a cafe, you had to pay $8,000, I think it was. So I think it's a good thing that we are maturing as to saying that, look, this is a tourist area, and maybe these people hire cars and all that. So once again, one of those grey areas, but I'm not too phased that there's no real parking supplied with it. You read the planning scheme, and it says that, look, these buildings shouldn't dominate, they should be subservient and complementary buildings, and be respectful, have a respectful relationship to the other buildings of cultural significance within the street. Now, this gets to the nub of my whole issue with this application is this brutalist building. The Hollymans building, by virtue of its association to the whole history of the Hollymans family, should be considered. I mean, the storylines have an important part to the character of a city, and as does the building, of course, itself. I mean, the Hollymans go back to 1861, when the first Hollyman come to Tasmania, and he was just a seafarer. He jumped ship in Georgetown, as I understand it, and he started this unbelievable, incredible empire that's an untold story in Tasmania's history. Hollymans went on to owning airlines, major ships that went plied Bass Strait. They got into agriculture and other things, and significant contributions to architecture in Launceston. There's a beautiful Art Deco building, Hollymans House up there. So, we just can't airbrush away from history the stories as well as the buildings as well. So there is an important link from Hollymans to the building itself. Now, what's the paradox of what we're looking at here today in Salamanca is, 30, 40 years ago, all the buildings in Salamanca were deemed to be ugly in Battery Point, and here we were trying to get rid of them. We've matured and we like that, what's happening there, our attitudes change, and in the same way as this Hollyman House building is exactly what was fought and won for Battery Point and Salamanca. So it's a bit of a quirk what's happening here, and I just think that, this deserves better. There are other brutalist buildings. We look at the Supreme Court just across the road and from the building there, and that's in that brutalist forms, and I could go on to name many other examples around. So the point I'm making there is what may be deemed ugly and not fit for purpose today has proven many, many times through history that in a few years' time it could be considered to be quite relevant to our whole storyline of everything looking perfectly nice and neat, English sandstone buildings in there. There is a place, in summary, what I'm saying, for a completely different type of architecture. We actually sell the book extolling the virtues of how good this building is as an award-winning building in the foyer of our council building. It's in Barry McNeil's book about architecture from the edge, it's called, and it highlights it, and it's one of the buildings. And you look at other buildings around like that, so there is a place. You've just got to try and look ahead to try and understand, perhaps this could be significant. And of course we're seeing it at the worst at the moment, it looks terrible, I get that, and so does the buildings around it and all that. But the precedent that's going to be set here is setting the bar for future development up this Montpelier. There'll be a lot of other construction work coming there. So, it's decisions we make here are, extremely important, and to justify it by saying, well, all the other buildings are ugly, to me, sorry, it doesn't cut the mustard. So, look, I'm really finding this hard. Look, I know the vote will go with it. I'm sorry, but I do put the weight of the history of this building, whilst it hasn't come of age today, it will. I'm not convinced that that this building could have been designed. The design of it's going to impede the whole success of it. As I said earlier, whether there's 10, 20, 100 rooms on it, that's not for us to consider. It's not for us to consider the profitability of whether so many beds make it or don't. It's not for us to consider that. I fully get that. I'm a developer myself, and I understand the challenges that go there, but I just think we have a responsibility. The heritage study could have been done much, much better here. It wasn't a proper study. It was just it could have gone deeper in there. So look, in summary, I support the whole building. I'm happy with the heights and everything else of that, but I really honestly think that the front of this building, and whilst we may have people saying too that it's only facadism, there is a place for that. And regrettably, I hate to do this, I cannot support it purely because of the history and for the reasons I've mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for your contribution, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Lohberger.
I just had a question for you. Councillor Kelly just mentioned we'll be setting a precedent. Will this set a precedent if we approve this building? Do we set precedents in planning when we make decisions? I just want to ask the Director through you.
No, Councillor, we do not. Director, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Some provisions obviously talk about the existing kind of built form and do take that into consideration. We are on the Tasmanian planning scheme now, and so we have moved the Sullivan's Cove scheme and adapted it to our local provisions. So look, it's not specifically creating a precedent. We've moved on from that Sullivan's Cove planning scheme now, and so we'll be assessing applications of the Tasmanian planning scheme.
Can I just confirm that? So the Sullivan's Cove planning scheme is no longer functioning, no longer in use?
Thank you, Director. Look, I think this is almost an exemplar application. The size of the paperwork for tonight is rather weighty, but the application itself has been through UDAP a number of times. It's really considered, it's the built form around the proposal. It's considered the heritage wall that is many Hobartians are quite fond of down behind the Hobart Council toilets in Salamanca Place. So we do also know that we need, I think it's about 2,500 hotel rooms in our CBD to support the visitor economy at last assessment. So we do need, surprisingly to some, more hotels. So it's great, I agree with Councillor Kitsos, it's great to see a proposal of this calibre come before the Council to provide accommodation in an appropriate area in an appropriate way. So thank you for your efforts as the applicants, and I'll be supporting it. Without any further ado, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Raise your hands, all those in favour? And against? That item is carried 6 votes to 1. Thank you. If anybody wishes to leave, I'll just give you a moment to duck out before we move on to our next item. All right, councillors and staff, we'll move on to item 7.1.1, 240 to 244 Murray Street, Hobart. I will open for, first of all, questions to the Director. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, look, I think this is one of the better buildings I've seen. For a small site, it's not a question. I'll let anyone else want to...
Councillor Harvey, we might hold you. I'll come to you first.
If anyone else wants to jump in
That's
with their
fine. Does anybody have a
on.
question? Councillor Loberg for questions.
Just for the sake of the public information, is this site a former service station that has actually been a locksmith for many years but has been vacant for the last 12 months at least?
Director.
Look, I can have a look at the contaminated site just to see if it was previously a service station, but it has been a lock for some time. So.
It was definitely a survey once upon a time, I believe, and I will wait for my contribution to say more.
Councillor Loberg, as I recall, it was sometime in the 50s, maybe 1957 rings a bell from the report, but I agree with your assessment. Any other questions? Councillor Kitsos.
There was a comment from one of our officers in the report, I think in the 700s of the supporting documentation, regarding the setback of the building on Murray Street and more in terms of street amenity and how it will fit in now and in the future. I just wondered if we had any commentary around that and whether there's anything in the criteria tonight that would consider the street amenity and the setback on that particular side of the building.
Clarify in terms of what kind of amenity in terms of pedestrian kind of interaction with the building? Or,
yeah, the report doesn't specify. I assume that when it's talking about streetscape and street amenity, and the setback on that side is obviously quite different to what the building is now. I guess I was just scoping out whether there are any concerns from staff around that before signing off on approval tonight of the building for what is an excellent design.
Through Chair. So the zone itself encourages building to the front boundary and doing that, and so I think through some discussion through UDAP was that that having that kind of landscaping stuff did kind of soften and kind of broke that kind of level of interaction a little bit. Obviously, having such a large setback is generally undesirable in the zone, and it's that desire to build to the front boundary, and so yes, I think it's not really compromising the intent of the zone standards there.
Thank you.
Councillor Loberger.
That just reminded me, Chair, there's quite an unusual situation or circumstance with this block, isn't there, regarding the fact that it's on the corner and a bit of road reserve has been carved out of it. And it looks like they want to overtake, they want to use a little tiny bit of that reserve. Do we actually know exactly how much of it is? It looks like the reserve that was carved out is straight, the line is straight, and what they're sort of taking is a curved line, so it was hard to know how much across the boundary they were coming.
Through you, Chair. Look, it's a very convoluted and quite a complicated history, but essentially the area that's proposed to be added that is a road reservation lease is approximately 70 metres square. So that is proposed. It is essentially a subdivision aspect of the application. The that kind of removal of the closure of the road highways, that goes through a separate process. So and that kind of get publicly advertised. So that got to go through that process. But essentially, that area does have a road. It is part of the road reserve for the purposes of being leased, and so that needs to go through a separate process. So yeah, there definitely is a complication there that will need to be navigated, and the applicants are aware of the risks associated with that.
That was my supplementary question. What sort of a risk does that provide for this proposal?
Yeah, so look, there is, so it goes through that advertising process. So the highways, it's closure and diversion of highways is the process through the Local Government Highways Act, and so that has quite a rigorous process in itself where it's actually advertised. So they kind of go through the process of kind of advertising that road closure. People can make representation to that, and then it goes through the TASCAT. So tribunal, essentially, there's representation, and council then would need to justify their position. The major city director of city assets likely would need to do that. But if you want some more information of that process, the director of city assets can kind of explain further. But yes, there is a risk associated with it if the representation was upheld for that road notation not to be.
I guess my final question is, while there is that risk, this so-called road reserve has never been an actual road reserve, has it? It's always been part of this site, part of the private site, and leased for $10 a year or something, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, it has been leased. So it has been leased for that amount of time. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Councillor Lohberger. Further questions? I have a question. Have we sought any remuneration for returning what is a road reserve to private use?
Chair, the land itself is actually owned by, it was Quinn was the last name, so they would need to negotiate through their lawyers to negotiate buying that land. So that's the other aspect of it. So we just simply lease the land, so we don't own it. And there's the original owner that originally was offering the land to council, however that never went through the final process. Okay.
And I think we can assume, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we can assume with, I can't remember the legal term, but if you've been there for long enough that it's considered your land.
Adverse possession, I think it was called.
Adverse possession. Director is shaking her head at the back. Director Avey?
Thank you, Chair. Adverse possession doesn't have any application in the context of whether or not something's a highway or not. That's a whole separate body of law.
Thank you, Director. I guess it was a clarifier around the assertion that there would need to be negotiation between the current owner and the listed Mr. Quinn as the owner. Is that?
Yes, Chair, that is correct. So step one would be an application to close the highway, and step two would be commercial negotiations to purchase private land.
I think, Chair, it's immaterial to our deliberations.
I think it is too, but it's quite interesting. All right. Any further questions? No, I'll open it up for a debate and a mover either way. Councillor Harvey.
Look, I'm happy to move it. I think it's a lovely looking building in the documents. I think it fits in with what we're trying to achieve in Hobart, which is the right height and the right locations. I like the fact that it's got this lovely rooftop approach as well, rooftop garden, which I think will be a bit of a green asset for the people using the building. It's got bike storage downstairs as well as shower facilities. I think that's important. And I appreciate the walking leg structure of it as well. So I think that was a nice part of the story there. And the fact that the interior design was left open so that the users could decide how they would use the building and how it would function for them. So I think overall I'm really impressed with this development because it seems a good fit for that corner and a good fit for Hobart. It's a building which has a lot more interest than your average tilt-up concrete slab type structure. I'm assuming the detail it's not it'll be a concrete moulded finish, I imagine. Would that be correct through you, Chair?
Yeah, so it's using David Mariner's state-of-the-art fabricating kind of technique, and so that they've used that Wardle have used that on other buildings before, so they can kind of get that detailed rippling. That they didn't determine whether they're kind of going tint painted or whatever, but they want it to be a quite high quality finish in terms of the colour.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, okay. When I first saw it, I thought, well, this looks impressive. When I read through the documents, you know, I was very pleased. Yep. So I'll be supporting this tonight.
Thanks for your contribution, Councillor Harvey. Anything further from elected members? Councillor Lohberger.
Look, I'll just very quickly say that I also support this building. I think it's a great use for a former petrol station site. I think we've got far too many former petrol station sites in Hobart. And while it has been, I actually missed it as the locksmith. I went there a few months back, and it was, there's a little retirement sign on the window that the locksmith's very happy to be retired, I believe. But I too will be supporting this building. It's a fantastic replacement for a very utilitarian single-storey building that would have had very poor insulation, etc. as well, I believe.
Councillor Lohberger. Councillor Kelly.
It's great to see some applications finally coming through here. So 2 in one night, it's really good. I concur with the panel, the advisory panel, that there's a lot to like about this building. Once again, depends which angle you're looking on it. I went and had a look there today, and sort of up and down the street, and the photo montages say it all. If you're driving down Murray, fantastic, because you've got the other side there, you've got RACT building, you've got a vacant block straight across the road, you do have the old building on the corner there, but look, I think driving down from there, it's going to look absolutely fantastic. However, if you go into Patrick Street, and you're looking down Patrick Street and look at some of the pictures they've got here, my goodness, to quote the panel, they say, the crew, some of the architectural responses, such as whether the slope wall that pulls the building scale down to the buildings next door will read as a monolithic bookend to the rows of the old buildings along Patrick Street. This is the challenge of architecture, isn't it? Can look great at one angle, but all I can say is I wouldn't want to be in that double-storey old Federation building smack bang against it. The panel does raise concerns about the water in a big downpour coming down, cascading into that, but look, that's going to be up to the technical people to solve. So I think they've put a lot of work into this. There's quality in some of it. I love the bottom and the corner there as well. It's opening up spaces and good response to some of the greenery and all that. So I will be fully supporting this application tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. If there's nothing further, I'll make a brief contribution myself. Some of the commentary, I think, from UDAP or in the report referenced that it's a great exemplar of what we can do on small corner lots, of which there are many in Hobart, that we don't need to have single story in our inner city on our corner lots. We can actually fit quite a lot. I believe this is 700 square metres or so of floor plate for commercial use. So all things considered, it's great to see both applications this evening go through UDAP and get what my sense of the room is great design outcomes as a collective. So all in all, I'm very happy to support it, and as Councillor Kelly said, it's good to see a number of applications coming to planning this evening. It's been a little while since we've seen a couple. So without further ado, I'll put that moved by Councillor Harvey. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you all for your contributions. Moving through to item 8, reports 8.1, delegated decision report. Are there any questions or queries from that? Do elected members want 20 seconds to just scroll through the table? Excellent. If I can have a mover for that item. Councillor Harvey doing the bulk of the work this evening. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. 8.2, planning advertised applications report. Question?
Yes, I'll move it as well if you like. But, I just had a question about number 8. Partial change of use to residential communal residence at 322 Liverpool Street. Can we get some details about that, about sort of how many communal people we might be talking about, and whether, a few little questions around whether the condition of the building has anything to do with the application, given the very poor condition of that building currently?
Through you, Chair. So that was identified through, I guess, compliance action that the use was not meeting the existing approvals. I believe there was a permit originally only for a teacher on occasional basis. So this is an effort by the owner to bring that back in line with the use in line with, I guess, the approvals that are necessary under the scheme.
I guess a supplementary question. We've discovered through compliance work some sort or other that there is more than one person living in the building currently.
That's correct. Yep.
And just to the other part of the question, whether the condition of the building has any bearing on this application, given that there are sort of tiles falling off the roof and various other issues with that building that are just getting worse?
At the planning stage, no, but obviously there'll be requirements to meet occupancy and other requirements under the Building Act to meet, I guess, what they have approval for, or they may get approval for under their planning stage.
Thank you. It's just that's a bit of a hot button site, that one. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent questions. Councillor Kintsos.
The lighting upgrade at Wentworth Street, item 12. Can we please have some background on that, please?
That application, so that's currently going through the advertising period and just finished on Friday, just gone. I believe we received 6 representations. I think it was 6. So so that application being on council land is delegated to the planning committee. So there was previously around 40 representations. So this is obviously a significant reduction in the concern, but there's still some concern there.
Anything further, Councillor Kintsos? No. Councillor Harvey.
I'm just wondering why this is back with us. Yeah. Didn't we approve this previously?
So previously it was 4 light posts, and now this one's 6 light posts. Is that?
I believe that the previous one was for new light poles and lighting implements. This is, I think, to more reflect, upgrade the lighting on the existing poles. So there's a reduction in the works that's being done, but essentially lighting upgrades still. So yeah, they have to go back to get approvals for that.
All right.
Can I have a mover for this item, please?
I think Councillor Lohberger moved it when he spoke.
I was happy to, but I was actually indicating a question.
That's right. Councillor Kintsos put up a hand, so Councillor Kintsos is the mover. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Excellent. We're moving through the agenda to questions without notice. Councillor Lohberger.
I just have one here, and I won't waste too many people's time. I noticed that the planning reports are back in the agenda, which is fantastic. They disappeared from the agenda and went into the supporting documents, which was quite inconvenient, and also a bit weird given that the agenda actually refers to this report and then it's not there. Can I ask that we please get the Planning Authority Committee report for actual planning items included in the agenda again, which is how it used to be done. They're also going into the supporting documents at the moment, and the supporting document was 140 megabytes or something today and was very difficult to manage. I just think it might balance up the amount of bulk in each of the reports. And to be honest, when I'm making my decision on these items, it is the Planning Authority Committee report that I look to. And it's quite inconvenient looking in the supporting documents for it.
governance, but I think that makes perfect sense.
Right, thank you.
Yep.
Why we put the agendas together, so we haven't been able to put them together as one, so the only way we can get them up is to separate.
Okay.
So we're working through glitches at the moment, so we apologise for the way it looks.
No, that's fine. Just today, it really, because the supporting one was so good, and there it is, it was very awkward. My poor little laptop wasn't coping.
Thanks, Councillor Loberg. I think the officers will take that as feedback and see how we go with the next one. Yeah. Further questions? I just have one brief one, which did pertain to the previous item. Has the zone purpose statement for commercial zones changed under the LPS, or is that commercial zone still listed with the same desirable characteristics?
So there's quite a bit of a change to that. So the commercial zone, we've always had our own kind of commercial zone, and there was further changes to the commercial zone as part of the LPS process. So it was we raised someone through the representation to really adapt it to, one, reflect the use table, having a transition of that area between the residential zone and the city, and having that kind of use transition, and also and built form reflecting that transition from the residential zone to the city. So it's very different to the commercial zone that you would see in the Tasmanian planning scheme, which has quite a different commercial, large scale kind of sale yard focus. So ours is a lot more honed to what we're trying to see in the area, and that kind of mixed use development.
Thank you. So that is more consistent with the Central Hobart Precincts plan as opposed to the interim planning scheme, which was not very consistent.
Yes,
Yes,
those changes put it further in that direction. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, we'll move to the closed portion of the meeting. If I can have a mover, please. Or Councillor Loberger got there. Councillor Loberger, all those in favour? Carried unanimously.